Hello all, my name is Wes. Welcome to the show. I'm painting this time an abstract landscape with honeybee. This is my attempt at adding this bee to my Mad Symphony series paintings. The tricky part is getting a more realistic thing to fit with this totally abstract, kind of a primitive abstract landscape where these big blocks of color represent flowers in the way that abstract things do, to fit alongside this more realistic depiction of a honeybee. And I kept going back and forth on how how messily to do the honeybee or how vaguely to do it. Kind of the resolution of the realism. I don't really have a reference photo to show. I just searched for honeybee online and ended up using several because every time I went back to it, I was using my phone really because I really wasn't interested in the details much. I mean, the highlights helped out, where the wings were helped out, that sort of thing, but in general, I knew that if I made it more naturalistic, more realistic, it wouldn't fit with the surroundings. Even as it turned out, it's a little odd, but not so much that it can't be accepted as art, you know. So you'll see me kind of work on the honeybee a little, and then I'll switch to working on the background and adding other colors, because if I were to work on just the one thing and not the other, then I would be left with not knowing how it will fit once I do the rest, and probably having to redo, you know, the bee. If I'd completed the bee before the landscape, I'd probably have to return to it to get it to fit again with the landscape. Another, I guess, thing to note, when you're working with acrylics, you're kind of working in layers. So each layer you lay down, you kind of need to let it dry for the most part as a general rule before you add another layer. So in parts like that where the honeybee was kind of blurry and messed up, sometimes I'm working on other parts of the painting while that part dries so I can paint back over it. And this is about the time where I decided I wanted a lighter sky. So I'm going back through with a very light blue to add more variation. In the original reference photo that I found for the honeybee, there was a bit of pollen on the bottom leg of the bee, and that's what that yellow spot is under it. And I think I eventually get rid of that part because it was never kind of clear what that was, and there wasn't really a good way to do that effectively. Once I started adding the smaller bits of paint strokes here and there, it was kind of the moment for me where I realized that this is how I'll need to handle the large abstracted flowers. I'll need to go back in with a little more detail here and there. And now with the pencil, I'm adding kind of seed pods or, petals or these sorts of things, just to add more detail in order to balance the detail of the honeybee. Again, just because it looks odd having this one thing more realistic and the rest totally abstract. And it's still going to be the case. I mean, it'll still be the most rendered thing on the canvas. But at least with the bits of detail I've put in the landscape, it kind of balances out a bit. At the top, when I added that bright red flower shape and then the blue square in it, I realized that doesn't work at all, but I had to let that dry before I painted back over it with some other color. Here I'm kind of reshaping the bee shape again, going into the background colors to do that. I am starting to like some of the shapes on the canvas, like on the far right. I really like the foreground orange flower with the seed pods and the white abstracted flower below and behind it. And on the far left, the other more detailed flowers. The honeybee was kind of always a question mark if it was going to work, that sort of thing. And generally, I was okay with that question mark kind of hanging over me the whole time. I kind of left it to the end to see if I really liked it or not. I've mentioned it before in other videos, I'm sure, but there's kind of two parts of my brain when I'm working on a painting. One part that's the more artistic side, and the other part's the more logical side. As I'm painting, I'm mostly using the artistic side, kind of doing the technique on the canvas, getting the right shapes or colors that I'm going for. And then alternating between that and the more technical, more logical side, I can evaluate what I've done and kind of plan the next step of what I'm going to do next. So in adding these blobs of color in the air, as I've done there with the orange and now the white, initially I was doing that just to balance the color here and there and the perceived detail in the landscape. But then when I stood back and examined it with my logical side, I realized, that kind of gives a feeling of kind of things in the air, an airiness to the painting. In fact, that's why I eventually called this painting Pollen, because it kind of gave me that feeling of, there's a bee and there's things in the air with flowers and seed pods and pollen is in the air, right? And that's kind of, where I went with it. This is one of those paintings I'm kind of so-so on. It's not my favorite in the world, but I was happy that it turned out the way it did. It's a 16 by 20 inch canvas, and on that size, I don't know if I've ever done a Mad Symphony series painting that small. And so that alone was a success for me, but then also to adding those details to the flowers also kind of gives me a good feeling on the experiment that I've done. The honeybee, I think it's good. Adding that second wing really helps, that foreground wing, but I think it's fine. It's just I I could take it or leave it, but overall I was real happy with the finished product. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you come up with any questions on this painting or others, leave a comment down below and let me know about it. Thanks for watching.